Fernando Szew is our guest today. He sold his company in 2021 to Fox Entertainment, but he started with just him and his dad in LA as a young person. He kept on growing and kept on changing and modifying the culture and keep on expanding all the way to the exits. It is a fascinating conversation and you would love it, from family businesses to culture change all the way to the impact of AI on your industry. You would love this one. Okay, Fernando, thank you for being with us. So
My
excited
pleasure.
to have you here. That's really great. So, this podcast, Unmask, is not about the entertainment. So, what a perfect way to start and say, why entertainment? It's probably one of the most challenging businesses in the world.
Entertainment because it's entertaining, because I grew up in LA. But really, the story goes back even further. I'm originally from Argentina, and I was tangentially, so to speak, born into a family that was pretty prominent in the entertainment industry in Argentina. My aunt, my mom's only sister, married into a family whose patriarch was one of the leading forces in media in Argentina. So I imbibed that from a very early age, um, through that family, who are very artistic and creative, and were very,
Th-
very close.
That,
But
that,
also seeing those bright lights and shiny floors, and that kind of inspired me. And for me personally, I've always been passionate about writing and reading and storytelling. So it kind of
Okay, so
confluenced into that.
that's a great point to start with, because many people, I can totally see why someone will move to LA or to New York for other arts and say the glamour, but you, especially, you just shared with us that you started, like, you basically experience production from a very young age in your family, even. So there's very little glamour. Maybe it looks glamorous. So, growing up in LA, behind the scenes, seeing the amount of work, the risk factor, the amount of money going into it, and the amount being lost in it, I would say, in an ordinary world, and again, we're talking to top performers, people will say, I actually know what's happening behind the screen here, behind the curtain. I'm not going to walk into this production. So it's not a natural choice. So tell me why, even though you were exposed to, actually, despite the fact that you got exposed to it as a young person, you decided to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of course correct a little bit, what I was exposed to at a young version, for me, again, very young, early memories, was more about the glamour, and that appealed to me. And it also seemed like a place that had a lot of access. And I liked and appreciated that. I was always very curious. We moved as a family to LA when I was young, when I was only 10. And my parents both worked tangentially also in the entertainment industry, but not actually in producing content, more on kind of the infrastructure side, so to speak, of of the entertainment industry. And they were able to provide us with a good upbringing, and it was great. But I wasn't necessarily exposed yet to what your question is, of the actual risks and pitfall of entertainment. By the time I did come into it, also at a young age, I mean, I started in the industry at the age of 23, like all in. We
So
can
5 years
talk.
ago, give or take,
Yeah,
knowing you,
yeah,
you're about 28
10.
years,
Yeah, 10
exactly.
years ago.
Yeah, you did
10
10
years.
years ago, yes.
But which we can talk about it if we get to it, on those beginnings and that. But then I started to really get exposed. But then it was me with another side of my brain and my upbringing and my kind of spirit inside of really wanting to be entrepreneurial and very business focused and business minded, and leaning on learnings from a lot of different folks, that I actually said, I see all these risks. I see all these, I would call them maybe failures, but I don't know if they are failures, but just risk and things that are somewhat, to me, perceived to be broken in an industry of, like, the dream factory of the industry, where you do have
Yes.
the glitz and the glamour, but then you have all of this, like, pain and broken dreams. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And I'm very competitive. So I just said, I'm going to be one that tries to figure it out. Not
So
always a straight line, but
of course, there's never a straight line for an entrepreneur, but uh, I really wanna stick with this one for a minute. I'm assuming in your 20s when you when you started, I know that you basically ran a startup, a family business startup, and we can talk about it. But I'm more interested about your state of mind versus actually what was done there. There were moments, I'm assuming, please correct me if I'm wrong, that there were moments then you had a chance to exit. You had a chance to try something different. I mean, you went to the East Coast, you went to Wharton.
yeah,
There were many doors that
yeah.
opened up for you. You could have become investment banker, you could have been an entrepreneur, you could open you all those things, right? And still something pulled you in. Was it an obligation, a family obligation? You felt like it's a family business, I have to go back to working, or was it purely your choice? And if that was purely your choice, what would be the thing that you said, yes, I can do it differently? What's the thing you saw, even though you saw the bridge or the exit opportunity, exit in a escaping way, not in a technology way, I'm going to sell the company for a lot of money. What was the thing that kind of pulled you in and said, I can do it my way?
Amazing question. That's never been asked. But it's
That's our goal.
funny.
I'm going to ask you many
I
questions you never been
know,
asked. Exactly.
Boaz.
Yeah.
This is why you're the best, man. By the way, so good to see you. I appreciate everything you're
Likewise.
doing. Um,
Thank you.
the the answer to the question is the question itself. At that very young age, I was so self-confident, which maybe then that got shattered, that having the choices allowed me to keep moving forward. That frankly and really that's what was happening in my mind. Um, and there was a whole family component to it too, but it wasn't like a debt to a family business. It was more wanting to be in LA with my family. And at the time, my wife and I had just gotten married, and I wanted to bring up a family in LA. We both wanted to bring up a family in LA. And this seemed like the thing to do and to test it out. And even through some moments of having choices, I made the choices from my company at the time also being, in a sense, one of the babies. Like, and that was,
Yeah.
taking choices with the company tied to my hip, so to speak. And I did, and I pivoted several times and kind of kept going as, most entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs do, which is you pivot different times and different ways. But the earlier, but just to
Please.
pinpoint
Yeah.
it to you, because the
Yeah.
earlier part of why the decision is exactly because I had choices. I
Yeah.
had the choice. And to me, the most important thing that I was not chasing, and this is where the family comes in, I was not chasing money. I'd always say the story. I went to the Wharton Business School, undergraduate, dual degree, wonderful, great professors. But the one thing that always stuck in my mind was a guest lecturer who, even though my memory is good, I do not remember his name, which always troubles me. And he came into an entrepreneurship class, and said, "Don't chase the buck, let the buck chase you." And I kind of lived by that. And there were
Mm.
even moments in our marriage with Nadina where she was like not understanding why I'm not taking, leaps to, because I had opportunities. And I just believed faithfully that the road was through hard work, which we can talk about all of that and kind of the family makeup to that aspect. And that as long that as I was having fun and believing in what I was doing, those days would come. And that's why, even though most, if not all, of my peers went into the roads you said, MBAs, investment banking, high-end
Consulting. Yeah.
consultancy,
Yeah.
like that was everybody.
Yeah.
And I didn't. The primary thing I chased was first love, my marriage, and then love for family, and then love for self and wanting to do something that I felt was more fun.
Oh, that's great. So there's so much to unfold here. So I'm again, we're going different directions. So
Yeah, yeah, take me.
here's the first thing I hear. So there's something, and give me your take on it. There's a sense of arrogance, lack of experience, boldness in our 20s that we lose over time. When I speak with people, I'm in my 50s.
I'm
we called,
not. Just you already
of
clear
course,
the record.
exactly. I'm 53 years old and I'm proud of it. Yeah.
As you
But
should be.
also you also from LA, so we never know really
Yeah,
how
we'll
old you are.
never
So
know. Yeah.
I know
No.
someone who is in charge of TMZ, so I can send them your way to find out how old you
Yeah.
really are.
Yeah. I know
Uh,
that I know that
e-
person too. By the way, I'm
exactly.
49. I'm not shy about it at all. A
Exactly.
very, very wonderfully lived 49 years.
Yes,
So
yes. So I call it wisdom now because I'm older, right? So, but my question to you, first of all, that kind of boldness and some belief in oneself that exists in your 20s, do you think it's a necessary thing to have? I mean, let me say differently. Look, I can tell you that a few years ago, I tried to start a startup, and that was my third or fourth career, whatever it is. And I caught myself as I'm speaking to people from Silicon Valley that I lost that blindness speaking
yeah.
about how this is going to, if you only give me $10 million, it's going to change the world because I was like, I've experienced winnings, many successes, but also many failures. Do you think you could have been that bold, that committed to I'm not gonna chase the buck, I'm gonna chase, the dreams in your late 40s?
Um, I don't know the answer to that. I contemplated it many times, and I will tell you that I think a lot of what you're saying certainly rings true to me. There was that uh, doing things without knowledge that are kind of risky and being bold and arrogant to some degree in just jumping off the cliff without a
Figure
parachute.
out the parachute,
And
figure out the
and
parachute on the way
and
down.
maybe yeah,
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
you're gonna figure it out or something's gonna give. And a couple of things I want to say about it. One is like I miss those days sometimes. I remember going back to my industry, and this is pre me selling the company MarVista to the seat that I'm in now.
yeah.
But it was already a larger company, and I was at one of our trade conventions, trade shows that we, typically go to, and it was already a large company with like, an actual company. It had gone from
Yes.
what it had been from hand to mouth to lifestyle to like a real company with and all kinds of stuff. And I truly remember walking, and it was in a beautiful setting in Cannes on the Croisette, where we tend to go because that's the industry we're in. And I remember to this day feeling like I missed those days where I could just pivot, where an opportunity can come into my mind and I could just like go chase it. That was like my first moment of, from a business perspective, saying, maybe I'm not as bold as I used to be,
Yeah,
to your point.
do you think first of all, I think that every uh, mature older entrepreneur or business owner has that. Do you think it's because of the amount of assets you now have, you understand responsibility, or is it because you think that as we get older we lose that flexibility that one needs to show at young entrepreneurship life?
I think you have more to lose. So risk becomes a different profile than it was before. And also, you're caring now for more people. So you're not just making decisions for yourself. Or maybe at the time it was myself and like a very close knit, wonderful relationship with my wife, but it was like that core center. Yeah, then
Yeah,
you have kids, then you're making decisions that could impact their life. Then you have very trusted and wonderful employees, and you're making decisions that could impact their lives. And I care deeply about all of those things, obviously. So I think it's more the human aspect and the human capital and the human relationships than assets
mm,
because I still live with that adage. Not that I'm about to go lose my assets, but I think it's more about the relationships and kind of what you're carrying forth as you get older and you have more traction in your path, right? And the journey that you've been on.
yeah.
But change is good. I mean, by no means do I want to take this conversation to say that I'm not open to change and that I lean into it often.
Yeah.
And the thing that I
I
want
think
to,
I think the distinction here that you're
yeah,
pointing to, there's a distinction, there's a separation distinction between change and risk.
yeah,
And they both, many times they go together, but sometimes the one is either or the other. So, like by the nature of being a founder, someone who sold the company, even today as a CEO, you
mhm,
constantly deal with change. I mean, that'll be, especially I mean, your industry looks nothing like it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and
yeah,
probably going to look very different 5 years ago. And I would
yeah,
love to dive into that one later on. But it's that balance or that tug of war between change and risk. And it's I think it's the key is to understand where your limitations, where you maybe were limited in your 20s about wisdom and connections, okay, but you were more flexible, you had more strength
Yeah.
in flexibility and risk taking. Now you have many more connections, you have wisdom, you have understanding, but you have less of ability to take risks. That complete makes sense. Yeah.
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 I mean, From Strength to Strength is a great book if I'm sure
Yes.
you've read
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think reading it as I'm approaching my 60s, my 50s, it's very telling to think about what I want to be thinking about when I approach my 60s, because there is a natural evolution of all of us strivers. I think it's actually even more appropriate to call that than just entrepreneurs. And what are the things that you can give that will satisfy you and also satisfy those around you that you care.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the words that we haven't mentioned, which comes with having seen things potentially age, is discernment. I do
Is
find
what said again?
discernment.
Oh,
You can
yes. Hmm.
discern
Yeah.
information from a different lens, and there is something true about having so many lived experiences, even in your gut, as you're trying to make decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, other part of what you just started with, which is really interesting for me, is you work with your dad, right? It's his company that you came into, or was it something you built together?
Both and actually, it was never truly a startup. I did not open the first bank account. Let's put it that way. My father had started a company out of his garage with another fellow. They were two basically consultants who were trading in the entertainment industry and came together to form an entity that really didn't go anywhere except they had a little bit of a client base and had a beginning of it. And that partner of his fell ill, and it was right at the time as I was getting married. We were getting married and moved to LA. And
Yeah.
my dad said, "You went to business school. Do
Hey,
you want to?
step
Do you want
up.
to?
Exactly.
Do you want to do this?" And to the first choice, I said, "What do I have to lose? Sounds like fun." Uh, and I caught I just caught the bug literally a week later. My dad and I were down in the basement of that same convention. It's called MIPCOM down in Cannes. And, it was very, very, very scrappy, but I loved it from the second I got there and just fell in love with
Mm.
trading internet. It
Yeah.
was almost like everything I was meant to do. And I quickly found um, that it is what I wanted to do. And I think my dad, we can ask him, but I think he found quickly that, we were going to be complementary as
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
in
So,
building this.
family dynamics is, we both are also part of YPO, Young President Organization, and a lot of conversations sometimes are family dynamics because it's family
Mhm.
businesses. In your case, it's different. It's not you're brought into like this huge business to some degree. But saying that, it's always interesting for me. By the way, my mom used to work for me, like as an employee, like a real employee.
Yeah.
And it's something that how do you manage a relationship where there's a natural relation between a father and a son or a parent and a kid where you listen to them, or there's times in your life when you don't want to listen to them at all. Suddenly they're your business partners, and
Mhm.
did you succeed doing this while still having weekend with the grandchildren or
Yeah.
weekend with you and your mom around?
Very hard, I gotta
Yeah.
tell you. And I did my thesis on family businesses. So
Mm.
talk about chutzpah and arrogance. I thought if anybody could, I could, because I knew all the playbooks. Of course, what I had studied were more massive organizations
Yeah.
with multi-generational wealth and how to, but I remember, one of the adages I had in my head is don't bring the family into the business and don't bring the business into the family.
And then you
And
did it and
hold
after
on.
writing this
Well, and
paper.
I'm not a rigid thinker at all, but that was like one aspect of like rigidity that again, I was young. So I'm like, okay, I
Yes.
got to hold on to this principle. And it became very awkward because like my dad would ask me a question on a Monday about how's your weekend. I'm like, we're not talking about that. Or we would go to like Shabbat dinner and he'd bring up the business and I'd say like this is not the place to talk about the business. Like
Yeah.
let's talk. Um, so that's like early anecdotes. We went through it. I do gotta tell you, we did always maintaining the sanctity of family first and foremost. But very hard conversations. I had to learn, not just with my dad, but with many, many others, but primarily with him because they are so, as you say, visceral and riddled with relationships
Yeah.
and love and even commandments. I had to learn how to let go of my conflict avoidance, which I think both he and I share in our traits,
Yeah.
and really be able to confront and have real conversations, which we did, and it all really worked out, um, for everybody and for the relationship and in all aspects, I would say. And
Did it?
I go ahead.
No, no. Did you stay with the business as you were growing and
He,
becoming? Because I know you went through a few phases till you sold in 2021, if I'm not
we sold in
mistaken.
2021,
Was he
and
a partner, a full
he
partner until
no, he
2021?
was a partner through not through 2021, but he was a partner through different phases and iterations. And along the way, I think, the thing that, um, we can again ask him, but I do know, and there are moments that I can recall also, like they stake out in my mind of understanding what Nakis really means.
Yeah.
Seeing my dad looking at me and me just seeing him and saying, "Oh my God, now I understand that word that I've heard so much." In just a way that I was growing in my career, that the little company that we started was growing, what it became, and then ultimately economically also what I was able to provide in, kosher, very fair way for him, and therefore for whatever he and my mom choose to do with their capital. So it really worked out in that regard. And I think emotionally, I'm sure, he's been through a different roller coaster than I have,
Yeah.
but we're, I mean, very, very tight right now and talk all the time. And I bring him into some things that I'm doing and decisions,
Yeah,
along
but
the way.
that's first of all, there's nothing as a parent, we're both parents, there's nothing more joyful than seeing your kid excel, which is
Yeah,
absolutely great. I'm looking for more, if a young person is listen to this one or watching it and says, okay, I have opportunity to go into the business or I'm already in the business, what are the fundamental things that they should keep in mind? Because it is a complex relationship. Now, look, any relationship is complex, whether it's marriage or
yeah,
business with another partner you never met and you met for the transaction. So this relationship are complex. But I think there's a new layer that is
yeah,
being introduced to a relationship when it comes to family, especially it's a father,
yeah,
son, or not just two brothers or two cousins doing business together.
yeah. Um, I think it's super valid to want to be in business with people that you trust, right? There is that connection. And also, what is important always in every relationship is dialogue, communication. And when the bonds are so tight and so deep, it really is. There's a thing that we talk about here in my business and in the companies that I run, or different iterations of what I run, called most respectful interpretation, which is really positive intent. And the reality
Explain
of that.
explain to me what it is before you explain to me what it is because I don't know this. I'm not familiar with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most respectful interpretation is really just knowing that, everybody. I mean, the simple example is you don't know what happened to somebody on the way to work. So just because they're a little bit snappy that day, like, just have some grace and know
Yeah.
that maybe it isn't about you. So that's like just a clear
Yeah.
example. If someone's honking their horn and you are about to say what a jerk, maybe you don't know that that person is rushing because whatever, I don't know,
Hmm.
their
Yeah.
mom is
Yeah.
in an
On the way to the
emergency,
hospital or
whatever,
something.
right?
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
it may
Yeah.
be. And we've all heard those stories. So we talk about that from most respectful interpretation, which is not the language I had necessarily when I was having those conversations with my father. But just to answer your question, if you believe in that, and if you have open dialogue, and the bonds and the love is so deep, then you should be able to get to a point of understanding that really, to not misinterpret what the other person is feeling, doing, saying, and just trying to get to the honest truth, the hesed of it all. And if you do, it can and might be painful, but the outcome is really good because you can
Yeah.
build something, and the journey can be amazing. I mean, my dad and I had many, many, many great moments, that he will take and I will take forever, of rolling up our sleeves and doing it together. And I'm sure that for him, I'm sure that for him, that means a lot more than anything.
Hmm.
Because as a parent, it would mean a lot more to me than anything, more than
Okay.
any success, more than any money. It was like the actual, the doing together. And so, but for young people that, I mean, to answer the question that you really asked about, and advice that I do give others is I never say don't do it. I just say be mindful. And like in any relationship, know that relationships are hard. This one, you're adding a layer of business to it and already the hardships of business to it. But
Yeah.
they can be magical, wonderful things, especially if you take the moment, like everything in life, to take a step back, zoom out, and reflect as to what is working, what is not working. And a lot of things really could be working in that relationship because you are cousins or because you are father, son, or
It
husband, wife.
trust, as you said. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And look, and I think it's easier to be positive about it when everything's go well. So when you success, you're like, oh, look at that. My father or my brother or my mother were next to me when we were succeeding, when we rang the bell, when we sold the company, right? The question is, how do you deal with, like you said, like the Shabbat dinner where the business failed, and many businesses fail, and then automatically, I think, as a human being, you have to really pause and manage the instinct of blaming someone else. Not
Yes.
100%, but you say, yeah, it's my fault. But if only that person would have done this and this, I would have been more successful. It's a real challenging, but it's a great bridge for me to ask if you don't mind, I will keep on removing, the whole point of Unmask is to removing the myth behind a successful. There's definitely a theme, whether we spoke with a jazz musician or politician or you. It's a recurring theme. And one of the things I want to ask about is, uh, coming from a family dynamics, did that spill over to the culture in the business? Because probably you tell me how many, you probably had a lot of people working for you. There's like hundreds, if not
Yeah.
thousands, or whatever it is. Yeah. How did that relationship? Oh, you're saying it's compartmentalized, but what was the culture? If I walk into your business, and I'm talking before you sold to Fox, uh,
Yeah.
what will be the culture in that in
I
the
had to
office and the
yeah,
productions?
no, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I had to shed a little bit. There was always a familial aspect to the culture and like family, but I had to shed and this is, I didn't know we were going to have this conversation. Man, I should have gone to therapy before. Uh, but again, I'm nothing but truthful. I had to shed a little bit of what was perceived to be the family because the family atmosphere that my dad kind of wanted was more of a paternalistic type of culture.
Yes.
And I didn't feel it was right for the company, the growth of the company, the moment in time we were in, the industry we were in. So that was, me driving a different culture was one of the points of, I would say, contention
Yes.
as
So
to
friction. Yeah. So okay,
a
was
friction,
there
yeah,
what?
and how to build trust with people and really not being in a, and I'm not, by the way, saying that my dad was wrong. I think he was
No.
right for a certain company and for a
And
certain
by the way,
moment
it's
in
not
time.
about your dad. It's about style of management.
Yeah, but
So
my style of
yeah.
management is not about, controlled. It's actually, I can talk now, if you want to pivot there, like I can talk for a long time about my style of management and the
Yeah, I
culture
do
that
want to
we
hear, and I
built.
want to. So because I want to hear about your style management, I want to ask: was there a pivotal moment? Was there a moment when you say that style of family-run energy, okay, is no longer sufficient for the building I'm going to build? Like it's kind of like foundation. Like the
Yeah,
foundation is no longer sufficient. We can build that. We can build a four-floor
yeah.
building on that foundation, but I'm building something much more bigger. I have to shift the culture in my behavior. Was that the case?
Yes. Again, I had the privilege of going to business school and really understanding new ways of management and the fundamentals of building a sustainable, growing enterprise. And I am, and was very growth mindset always. And that was like a core principle of mine, which again was maybe a little bit of friction of lifestyle versus I just wanted to keep growing. Not because I
Yeah,
was seeking the money. I just like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
what I was meant to do. I felt like I was meant to manage a bigger company and continue to build careers, not just for myself, but those around me. Um, so one of the pivotal moments, and by the way, first I want to call back to a podcast that you had, one of your episodes where you talked about building, no, really, in the foundation of building, and people like put the flag on top. I love
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
People put the flag on top, but that's not it. I mean, if you don't have a
Yeah.
foundation, the top can have a flag, and then the rest will fall. So
Exactly.
I appreciate that because to me, it's always been around like the building blocks of the company, which start with a very firm, grounded culture of trust and making sure that you can do that, which we can talk about. The
Yeah.
pivotal moment for me was I mean, we're shifting, but I had another business partner, and we had early success for the first time. We had like an inbound of somebody that wanted to buy the business. And again, it was a moment of inflection because for the first time we had to ask ourselves, what are we worth? What's this value? What do you want? What do I
Yeah.
want? And it started to create a little bit of a rift in kind of what we wanted out of the business now that we were seeing some success. And I wanted growth more than lifestyle. I really was seeking that. And I was able to find it with an investor group that brought to me things that became very natural for me, which was a playbook of how to really grow companies. So that became like a bit of a pivotal moment of me saying, if I wanted to move from it had been a hand to mouth company with my dad, then it became like a nice lifestyle firm with these other partners, including one principal one. And then if I wanted to professionalize it and grow it into a true enterprise, then I needed to kind of really invest in building the culture and pivoting the business and get it
Yeah.
like I kind of shedding the paternalistic aspect of it
Yeah.
into a different culture.
Okay.
And
Let,
that
let,
that was
let,
it. So that
let
so
me
I
repeat what you said, and just so to make sure I got it. Okay. So it
yeah, yeah,
sounds to me that you had to reinvent styles of management based on the game you were playing. So
beautifully said.
you really realize that it's not sufficient. There's nothing wrong with it, but it was not sufficient anymore to play that family business. And then when you got to a comfortable, great partner, whatever that we don't know the
It
story, doesn't
was.
really
Yeah,
matter
yeah.
right now. But I'm saying it was not sufficient. You said, no, I'm hungrier than this
Yeah.
guy. Nothing wrong. By the way, I split from my business partner because of that. He was not hungry and I was hungry and it didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And I took a risk. In my case, it didn't turn out, but it doesn't matter. Like,
Mhm.
like we were sitting there and he said, I want a lifestyle. He said, you love working. I don't, and that was, so I really, you realize that again it's not sufficient and the level of hunger and commitment you have you have to shift it again. You're saying it in a very calm way. I'm quite blown away by it because I'll tell you why. Most people I work with, they don't have the capacity to shift cultures. They don't have the capacity to be flexible enough. So again, diving into your drive, your hunger, your entrepreneurship spirit. First of all, the fact that you recognize that it's no longer sufficient, you have to change the culture. But then how did you actually do it? I mean, let's talk about how do you change culture?
Yeah, we can talk about that. First, I want to honor a few people because
Yeah.
probably number one, it's my complete blind arrogance. Let's just call it that. I hate to call it that, but I guess it was. Let's call it self-confidence and self-belief. And but really, it's from the center that I have when I go back home with my wife and
Yeah.
being able to like really feel that no matter what the changes are, if it felt right, then do it. And I'm not saying she always gave me that. She just gave me the center. I think it was innate in me to always want to say, I want more. I see a better path. Trust myself. You trust me. And she's like, of course I trust you. Let's do it. So that's number one. Being a middle child, growing up in the same family we were talking about, I think that
Yeah.
has a lot to do with it. I really do believe it. And
Why?
being
I gotta get this one. I'm
because
the
I had to
oldest, but my
adapt.
my
I
wife
don't
is
know.
the middle one.
I
Yeah.
had to adapt to being cool with the older one and being cool with the younger one, and also
Oh,
being a
got you.
peacemaker, and also the change when we immigrated and my position in the family. So I believe there's that. And then I also, there are mentors in my life that also kind of believed in me uh, to continue to say, you're doing the right thing, keep doing it. And really, all that was like a sounding board and a belief system that was as deep as religious faith, but also in actual successful human beings who continue to push me through those different iterations of you're doing the right thing. I got you. You know, people that you can talk to. You don't make decisions on your own. At
Yeah.
least I don't. I always think about it. I talk it out with people that I like and that I trust. And
I'm gonna push back. That's the you're in LA. I'm in New York. I'm allowed to be more aggressive.
oh,
And it's wonderful that you're giving credit to others. There's no doubt that a proper partner in life is critical for us. To we have the freedom to fly when we have a base that we can
correct.
fly from and come back to. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're not taking any credits away from either our life partner or business partners. But saying that, I want to push on the culture change
Sure.
because in the end of the day, it's not like people. A lot of people want to change cultures. A lot of people spend. I mean, you went to grad school. You went to Wharton. Um, you know that there's
Yeah.
companies that bills billions of dollars and going to companies try to change cultures from Uber to smaller companies, right? And a lot of them fail in changing cultures.
Yeah.
And you switch twice. You switch, or maybe even four times when you went corporate, when Fox bought you. Okay. So I'm really curious about what was the conversation you had with yourself or with your significant other or
Sure.
with your mentor that gave you that willingness to let go of one thing and adapt a different way of thinking.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to make this into just Juju LA speak because clearly you don't want that. But I'm going to, words do matter. And there's something we've been saying arrogance. And I think that's actually what I don't have. And I think that is part of why I'm so open to change is I have been
Yeah.
very self-confident, but I'm not arrogant to think that I always have the answer. And I've known that so many times. And all those moments of change, I've always been confident and faithful in believing that I was going to be okay with that change, but also leaning on the change and leaning on, movement that was kind of shifting and being open-minded to it, being able to zoom out. I think that actually is lack of arrogance. It's not thinking that it's principled and it's one way, um, and just being open to it.
Yeah.
So,
No,
and I
I get it. Okay,
and
so
I'm
here's
still
here's
open to it, even
yeah,
as
yeah.
I'm,
No, as a
even
person,
as I'm going through. Well, as I'm going just from a business perspective, as I'm going through it now, I'm driving very hard with like a mission of mine. This is very YPO speak, but which is trying to scale organizational health because I've done it when I was in control. Now I'm not really in control. I'm working for a larger
yes.
organization
Yeah.
but I'm running a pretty deep
Hmm.
division, and I I know that I can drive the culture down. It's really more sideways and up, and like how do you do that, and what things do you have to adapt? And also, as I talked about the playbook that I was given by these investors, it wasn't something that was ready made for me. I had to adapt it, and I had to change it, and I had to bring it into entertainment and to the size and type of company that we were. So
Yeah.
I just get a lot of joy out of doing
No,
that.
this is really cool. I'm thinking about the other side of it. Um, you have this willingness to be flexible. You're very clear of things you know, but you're really, really clear about what you don't know. You say, "I'm therefore hungry." I mean, I think if I follow your life, and maybe it's an immigrant thing, being an immigrant too, we're hungry. Okay, we want to prove there's a hunger that is there, and there's definitely hunger to change, to growth, that's all that stuff. But what about the employees?
Yeah.
How did a lot of people move from with you from one phase to the other, or do you have to change? And I spoke with that in the past that I had a great accounting
Yeah, yeah.
department, and I had to let it go when I went public because it wasn't sufficient. It wasn't bad about. They were amazing people. So did you have to switch and change employees as you moved from the family to the kind of like a lifestyle to your hunger from hunger to corporate?
Both and. Yes, yes, and yes. I had to change, and at the same time, I've had some people stay with for a long time. The turnover around me has usually been relatively low in a good way, and morale really high, at least in the past, I would say 10 plus years. And just for instance, when we sold the company to Fox in 2021, everybody came with. Uh, that was one of the things that appealed to me at
Did
that
they all
point.
have equity in it, or was it just because
No,
of
no,
they
no,
want?
no, no,
Okay,
no. There
yeah,
was
yeah,
no,
yeah,
they did not have equity. It was because part of what I was selling was the human capital and the culture that we had
yeah.
built,
Well, they kept
actually.
you on for a while. Many
Yeah,
companies they buy, and then within a year they say,
no,
okay, you
exactly. So
finish your and they leave you. The fact that they left you and made you a CEO shows that you brought some um, culture and understanding and capacity that they're interested in beyond just buying the company
yeah,
and
and
its assets.
just to course correct, because I'm corporate and we have to make sure I'm not a
Yes, absolutely.
CEO.
No, no. Look, and
I'm
by the
not,
way,
but
yeah, by
but
the way, I'm going to
yes.
ask anything, and you can say I can answer it, or let's
No,
like
no, no,
whatever.
no, no. I
And
can
completely
answer.
okay. I totally get
No,
it.
no, it's just
Yeah, yeah.
the career path has been I'm now president of one of the divisions
Yes. Okay.
of
So,
the
sorry.
entity.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yes, and not only did they want to keep me on, they kept everybody. We kept everybody. A lot of people have spawned into different parts of the corporate organization, building wonderful careers. And I get to lead a lot of the same folks that were with me at the moment of the transaction that were past my earnout actually in
Yes.
the 3 years and doing more things and also incorporating other people. And it's a wonderful experiment of this cultural aspect that we were talking about in an ever shifting industry. I mean, we can talk about this. It's an interesting,
Yeah.
fun,
I want to leave time in the
challenging
end.
moment
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that
It's.
I
I
put
really
myself
want to
in
hear
and
what you're
that
saying
I'm
about it.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah. No. No. It's it's really interesting because uh, you have the strength and the ability to call the shots because you're running the show. Sometimes, for example, you know it from like negotiation, for example, sometimes number two and three, even if you give them the freedom to go and lock the deal, they don't have the ability, not because they're not smart, not because of the way the position they're in. They're number two and three. By the nature of the position, there's things as number one that you can say that the buck ends with you, like it stops with you, like you have that freedom. I'm curious, how do you bring that culture? How do you let people growing? And you're saying, look, how do you train them? Here's my question. How do you train them to adapt to the new culture you're just bringing? Because you had a vision, right? You realize you're hungry, you want to grow more, you want to bring a group of, I don't know if it was a private equity or whatever it is that you kind of back you up and be involved, give you a new playbook. How do you, what's it, what is conversation you had with your employees saying, hey, we're going to play a different game here. I'm switching it's like Michael Jordan. I'm done with basketball. I'm going to play baseball now. It's like how do you do that?
um listen, I think, what, as you said, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. One of the strengths that I've had early on is being able to motivate people and to bring people to want to be a part of my culture and my build, depending on even what that was. And as we were talking about, whatever phase it was. And that a lot at the core of it is being okay to fail and showing people a land of opportunities. And as I went through one to two to three to four on the steps of the ladder that we talked about and the changes of culture and the changes
Yeah.
of game, I like what you said. Literally, I was changing the game and changing even some of the rules of the game and what we wanted to be and who we were, still retaining some of the kind of the root of my principles and my essence as the head of it. Um, Really just showing people opportunities and showing them that with some humility that this may not work out, but showing them the path of why I believe in it and being very clear in the communication and being very clear in the things that I know and then in the things that I don't know, which has been, I think, a benefit to me and really challenging because not everyone is the same way. I understand that. Not everybody can live in the gray. And also, not everybody is in the position that I'm in because, I can be in the gray, but if I decide it's black or I decide it's white, I can make that decision. They're not. So there's got to be, building a culture of people understanding. But as things change, even in the process, to continuously communicate it. I'm
Yeah.
a really firm believer in communicating, communicating, communicating. And obviously, it's much easier when it's a company of five than it's a company of 500, but you can still do it. And now, technology there's some negatives aspect to it and there's some wonderful aspects to it, which include communication tools.
Mm.
and the way that you can do it through technology and also to be in person and to just show your human side.
Yeah.
And that uh, has been one of the secrets I think that has helped me unlock kind of the change management aspect of what I've
Yeah,
been
it's
doing.
amazing. We can spend hours on it, but I do want to, I want to cover a part. So I want to jump actually to the last chapter so far, and who
Mhm.
knows, right?
Yeah.
And I'll ask a very blunt question. Why did you sell?
Um, I was not seeking to sell, but I knew we were coming out of COVID. And even prior to COVID, again, I had gotten to a size. And as you know, once you get to a
Yes.
certain size of company, I call it the game of it's like flirting, it's like dating, like you get inbounds and this and that, and especially in ever changing industries. And as an entrepreneur, who doesn't go into like, oh my God, you start dreaming there, you start dreaming there, you start dreaming there. But I was always pretty focused and kind of tuned out that noise, so to speak. But there were a few strategic conversations that through the years I
Yes.
kept pretty warm. Um, and Fox was not one, by the way. Fox is a place that I admired always, but they were not necessarily a place where I thought that it could be anything but a client of ours. But I got an inbound, and at the time, because I had gone through the strategic conversations with others, I had already aligned a strong relationship with an investment banker. So I got an inbound that sounded promising, and I said, "I'm really not for sale, but if you want to know more about the business, talk to the
Yeah.
bank."
Everything has a price also.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not for
exactly.
sale, but
No,
if you
no,
like,
but
hey, I'm willing to have this
of
conversation if,
course.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I
Yes.
knew from a core business perspective, and I was talking already to the investor group that I had, I was majority, they were a strong minority, but with some governance, that something had to give. Like I had gone to a place where I had grown it, and either we needed to raise more money, and they were going to be my first phone call to kind of catapult
Yep.
growth in a different direction. That was my mindset, again, growth mindset. But I knew that it's I think you said it too, and you said it more articulately than me. And again, in one of your interviews, like
I doubt it. Yeah. Yeah.
you grow or you die.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
kind of
Either
aspect.
expand or shrink. Exactly. You either
Expand or
expand or
shrink. Exactly.
yeah,
See, you
exactly.
did
Yeah.
say it more eloquently.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
right.
No, by the way, it's not a personal phenomenon. I always look at it. There's nothing in the universe that does either expand or shrink, whether it's a planet or a plant or a human. And status quo, I don't know if I spoke with you in Pam, but status quo is an invented phenomena by humans. It doesn't exist in the
I
universe.
agree.
So by the way, whether I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. Like it
Well,
is
I just know,
happening,
but I'm saying
Exactly.
it
Yes.
you
It's
put
an
words
illusion
in.
that yeah,
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 but you put
yeah.
words into exactly how I feel, and part of why maybe should have been the answer to the question of why so comfortable with change, because we know that change is inevitable. So why
Yes.
fight it?
Great.
And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yes.
and I've known that. So that is why the status quo does not exist. And for those that say, I want to kind of coast and have a lifestyle firm, well, you may not, because
Yeah,
you also don't
it's
know
okay.
what
But by the
tomorrow
way,
is
it's
going to
okay
look
to
like.
shrink also. It's okay to say,
Yeah.
look, I don't want to work as hard. I want to play more golf. I want to travel time
Yeah.
with spend time with my loved one. No problem at all. There's no judgment there, but just the illusion of, I always tell people, life is about standing on a stairs going down. Escalator, basically. So you're standing, you're like, I'm not moving, but the escalator is moving, right? So you got to choose if you're going to stand on an escalator or you're going to keep on walking as the escalator
Yeah.
pulling you down. It's the same thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so back to your sales. So you said, look, I have something has to happen, right? Either going to sell or I'm going to raise a substantial amount of capital. And what made it was again, I'm going to ask a question whether you can answer and find. But was it about Fox, the dollar signs, the culture? What's the thing that tracked you to go and say, I'm going to go with Fox?
It made sense through and through. And it was interesting because it was a bilateral conversation. It was not a process. So by definition, even though we just had status quo, doesn't matter. I kept telling them, and the bankers kept telling them, really, you're fighting the status quo. The status quo is good, and he's got a
Yes.
profitable
Yeah.
company that's growing. But it wasn't really a status quo. It was going to be, another path that was maybe would have required a different type of heavy lift
Yeah. Yeah.
for me. But really, what appealed to me was knowing that I was going to be able to plug myself and the whole team into a place that was also growing, that was changing because Fox sold most of their assets to
Mm.
Disney in 2019. So they
Yeah.
were looking to do things differently. And I had always admired, and this is truth. And I have many friends that have worked through Fox through the years as I grew up in the industry. I always admired the culture of boldness and entrepreneurship that as a major, major entity in the entertainment space, Fox had. So it seemed like a place that I could
Fit.
find. It seemed like a place that I could,
Yeah.
yes, there are some truths also. Some of the truths are when you're selling a company small mind compared to the big one that's buying you, they do a lot of diligence, and God knows they did a lot of diligence. I didn't do that much diligence in a sense, but
Yeah.
I knew, again, in my gut, I knew that there could be a fit, and I had met some of the folks,
No.
and I had kind of observed how they behaved, and it's been great. It's been a journey, not obviously a
Wow.
straight line, but it's
Okay,
been
so I
a
have a
really
question
good.
about that, and then I want to jump into something different, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
So one is it? What is the biggest change? You were self-made, driven from the like you said, Argentina immigrant, started like all that
Yeah.
stuff, and then suddenly you are being bought and being
Hmm.
brought in, not just bought. Here's a check, go home after 6 months or 12 months.
Yeah.
What are we, if someone asks you, what is the fundamental or the top three biggest changes between running the company until in 2020 and running running a section of Fox Entertainment now?
Well, decisions aren't only mine.
That's a
And,
very big one,
and
and
that's a very
yeah,
big one.
yeah,
So I've always been collaborative with my leaders and when I had partners, but ultimately, and we talked about it, me talking to sounding boards and things like that,
yeah,
but ultimately the decision was mine. And now it isn't. So there is a shift there in being able to, again, a different game of still maybe influencing decisions, making some decisions, also having the ability to be called out and being able to, even though you're driving an agenda forward that you think is right, somebody because of a different context that they have uh, will guide you to not go there, which has been also one of the shifts. And now a second thing to, I'm going to try to get to three, but a second
yeah.
one that was an
Maybe there's only two. That's fine.
well,
Also,
the
yeah,
second one,
yeah,
the main
yeah,
struggle for me, here's the main struggle earlier, and it still is the case, is not about the decision making, but I had all the context. No one had more context than me when it was my company because I knew
yeah,
it. And if I
yeah,
didn't know it, I would get it. Now I don't have all the context. And as you're me, very hungry and very competitive and wanting to win, and wanting the enterprise to win, and I don't have the full context because I'm not in that seat.
yeah. Because you
That
have a narrow, and it's not a
yeah,
negative thing, but you have a narrow view of the big picture, and that's a huge company.
yeah,
It's global
exactly,
company that has from
exactly,
stock management all the
correct.
way to like their own stocks to all the, and you see it from your view. Now you understand. It's no longer the view; it's your view, and that
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
correct. And that
yeah.
that shift has been very important for me to try to understand, and I still struggle with it sometimes. And I think it's probably a natural thing that a lot of entrepreneurs go through. So I think that's been like the biggest change and challenge, and the adapting to that. It also has so many things in my life has given me more empathy. Now I know what other people have felt maybe around me where they were driving an agenda, but because they didn't have the
Yes.
context, and I didn't give them the context because it
Yeah.
wasn't their context to have. Like it's
Mhm, yeah.
okay. Not because I
Totally
was
get
keeping
it.
it a secret, but just
No,
because they
you were
had a
saying,
job to do and I
yeah,
have my job to do. So
yeah.
it's interesting that to be kind of doing that and feeling that. And and I understand it. So I inherently understand why it's happening, but that doesn't mean that
Yeah, and
that
also
it's not a
knowing
hard
it
thing.
doesn't mean that you actually can live peacefully with it, especially as someone who's self-made. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I think those.
Amazing. Okay, look, we can. I wish I was more of a Joe Rogan kind of. We can speak for 4 hours, 4 hours, because each element of our conversation, I could have like an hour and a half conversation, but from management style to growth, it's been extraordinary. But I don't want to let you go before I hear your vision. You are in one of the most challenged industries. You always been. I mean, no one chooses to make films or TV because they just want to make money. That's not the easy way to
Yeah,
make money. It's
correct.
extraordinary. You can make a lot of money, but your industry is going through complete. I don't know even how to say it. Even it's a chaos. It's creativity. It's from AI to the way we explore. I mean, we're talking on a podcast. There's more
Yeah.
streaming on YouTube than any other channel. Like, tell me. And again, I promise not to come back in 3, 4 years and ask you. Say you said so,
Yeah.
but give me your vision of how is this industry going to look, and specifically people who love media, people who love actually entertainment, not just media, because media is so even broader, but like entertainment, and they sit there and study college or they go to grad school or they're like, what do you tell them about what's happening next in the industry and what's going to happen in the next few years?
So I don't have the answer. It's so I you can come back and because that'll be my answer. I told you I didn't have the
Exactly. I
answer.
told you I don't
So
have the answer. What do you want?
uh,
Yeah.
but here are a few things that I think are tenets of what I believe and some truth, which is, and I know this is going to sound a little cliche, but storytelling is as old as human beings. So to be in the storytelling business is a good business to be in, especially if you're so inclined and you like the creativity and the art of it. How that gets produced, delivered, what medium you're seeing it on, whether it's on a phone or as we're doing it now, through I'm on a webcam with
So,
you.
so you think that the technology is a vehicle, but the storytelling is the core.
The
Yeah. So
storytelling
whether
is
you
the
do it on
core.
your phone or you're doing it in like huge studios in like the 50s with like those
Correct.
huge, studios in
Yeah,
LA. Yeah.
and I think there's yes, correct. It's what you said. I think the technology only enables the storytelling to adapt to the times, to be told in a different way, to maybe bring in different elements. So I think storytelling is an aspect of entertainment that will continue to it will continue to be for sure. So it's going to continue to iterate. And I would, as I say to those young people that want to get into the industry, I'm like, you're the one that are going to be teaching us how to take some of the things that are as old as the Bible or Shakespeare. You take your pick of like the beats of telling a story, but how do you adapt them to the new technological advances? So I think that marriage will just continue to
Yeah.
happen and elevate and create wonderful experiences for us humans.
Ah,
And I'm excited to see the future of that. And then the other thing that that I think is important, even though today may not be the best day to talk about it, but I will say it because I believe in it 100%, which is content creation and content consumption has now been super globalized. I mean, and that's an amazing
yeah.
wonderful thing. And it's part of like the career that I've had because I was in the international trading business from at the age of 23, as we talked about. And I don't take credit for it at all. I think most of the credit goes to some of the bigger companies, including the major disruptors like the Netflixes of the
Netflix. Yeah.
world.
I mean, I would say 60, 70% of what I watch Netflix is actually not US productions. It's
Correct.
different shows from Netherlands or from like different places that I would never watch if I wasn't. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a bit of a disruption that was also happening in the industry, and one could see it. And then it took the technology and the boldness of a Netflix to kind of really do that. But even if I call back to what I admire for Fox, Fox had major international channels and was able to now do local content married with international hits and like so it was something that was beginning to happen, and now it's totally here. And now because of technological advances, even more so. And then the other thing that I want to say that maybe your audience isn't as familiar with, which is the consumption is through the roof. So even
Mm,
though you read and you hear consolidation and lost jobs and all that stuff, which is real, it is real. But at the same time, if you zoom out and you look at things locally, you're going many countries that had one less than a generation ago had one television per family, maybe even neighborhood or village, watching two or three channels, and now they all have this. And
yeah.
now literally almost every individual and can consume content because they do. Obviously, they use it for other productivity tools, but they very much use it for content consumption. So
Yeah.
it's exciting, challenging, but super exciting.
Oh, isn't that the way to describe your story? Exciting but super challenging.
Yeah, I guess.
Fernando, you're a great storyteller. So I know we touch on so many things that we haven't even scratched the surface. So what an extraordinary story, and thank
Well,
you
I
for being an
appreciate you for
inspiration. It's really,
taking
really
for
awesome.
calling
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Perfect. Thank you very
Hopefully, it
much.
all made some sense.
It
But
made a
yeah,
lot of
through.
sense to me.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll
see what
see. Yeah, you'll
exactly
tell
then.
me.
But really, thank you. It's been really amazing.
But
And
thank you also. You've as I called back, you've given me some gems. I always that is the other thing I got to tell you about adapting to change in entrepreneurship. At least for me, be a sponge, learn from people, and I've
exactly.
learned from you. So I
Oh well,
appreciate you,
thank you.
boss.
Well,
Really.
as we say, Chag Sameach, and say hello, send my love to your amazing wife.
Thank you.
As we both know that
That she's at
we
the
are
core. Yeah, all this is just a veneer. She's the
exactly,
power.
exactly, exactly. And I really hope to see you in person very, very soon. Playbook. It is really critical that you make sure that everybody knows what's important to you. One thing is to know what's important to you, and that's the beginning, but that's not sufficient. One really needs to know that the environment around you know what's important to you. It's from a support perspective and from a vision perspective. If you keep your vision and what's important to you to yourself, it has very, very little impact. If you share it with others, yes, it's risky because when people will know what you're up to, if you go out there and you say, hey, I'm going to run a marathon in 6 months, now everybody knows it. And when they see you, they'll be like, hey, by the way, how is it the training? And if you haven't trained in a month or in 2 weeks, you're like, oh, I can't believe it's going to remind you. But the benefit of sharing what's important to you is that people will either step up to support you, ask you about it, and now you have to perform. Now it's no longer just about you writing your poetry for your draw and not taking that notebook out. It's out there in life and people want to support you, want to help you. And if they don't want to help you, that's fine also. You know, other people know about it. You can't hide. So it's critical that the moment you know what's important to you, you stop hiding and you start to share it. Share it on social media, share it with your friends, share it at parties, because the more people are going to ask about it, whether they're interested or curious, the more you will have to step up. That's a playbook. Step up.